Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Anti-Diet Club podcast. We're back this week with a really pertinent episode, I think, or pertinent topic matter around fat phobia amongst intimate partners. And this has actually been a request, right, that we've had through from listeners. And I think a really good time of year when we are maybe thinking about stepping deeper into anti-diet work, or maybe taking the first step into it. Our concerns around it often stems from what the person closest to us might take that news, or how supportive they might be. So yeah, I'm excited about this one today.
Yeah, me too. I think this has been a request several times over from many people, because I think people do struggle with this, especially if your partner's like, we can get into it, but if we've got partners who have typically known us always as a dieter, like if they've always known that about us, if that's part of our identity, we often talk about the identity of, being deep in diet culture. And when you start stepping away from that, it can be confusing to know and to sort of, manage how other people see that, especially intimate partners. I think it's, you spend most of your time with them, right? So when you suddenly switch up how you're doing things, it can be, really, really strange for that, like for you to understand how they're going to actually feel about it.
Yeah. And also, let's get straight to it. I think one of the big reasons that prevents folks from entertaining the idea of not dieting and, allowing their body to land where it's going to land is because of the fear that what is going to come with that, the fear of rejection, the fear of not being attractive or desirable to that person, the fear of not receiving their love, right?
Yeah.
Those are legit fears because we all need that stuff. So let me start by asking you, like, what was your, like, how did that work for you? What was your process with that?
Well, I mean, I didn't hide it at all, because I see a lot of my clients quite often don't tell their partners that they're even going to dive into this stuff, but I didn't at all. I kind of had that conversation with my partner about wanting to just not have this all or nothing kind of life around food and around movement as well. It was a big part of everything for my journey was like food obsession and movement obsession, and just being very much like on it or off it. It was like very all or nothing, very black or white. But I had the conversation and I spoke to him about it, and he was really, really open to understanding that. And I was really, I say lucky. I don't think it's lucky because I know that about him. That's why we're together. But I didn't have like a challenge in that sense, but I wouldn't say he understood it. I wouldn't say he completely understood it. I think he still maybe thought that it was, some sort of moderation, because he was deep in diet culture as well, not in the same way, not for the same reasons. And he'd been brought up in diet culture. So I don't think he fully understood. I don't think I fully understood what I was getting myself into, because let's not forget, when I first started intuitive eating, I thought it was another way to lose weight. So it's difficult to kind of dive back to that very beginning. But obviously, like as things have progressed, that's not been the case, and that hasn't been it. But the journey, we just kind of like gone through it.
Would you say you kind of learned together?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, it's really hard to describe, because I wouldn't say that my partner is like reading all the things and like unpacking his own, weight bias or anything necessarily. I take him through it gently. I know he's grasping it when he sends me articles and this, that, and the other. He's like got his eyes much more open, I would say.
He's tuned into it.
When he sees an article in the paper or something about somebody struggling with eating or body positivity or something like that, something relevant to what I do, he will send it to me. And he's also quite open about the like not understanding the struggle and not realizing it was even a struggle, because we're really good, I think, at hiding it. When we're dietists, we're very good at going, no, it's fine, I'm really enjoying this, it's, you know, this is for my health and it's all good. I never said this is hard, this is hell, this is not what I want to be doing, because I was so bought into it. So it's a big shift in that sense. But he definitely sees the pain behind it and the struggle, and quite often talks about how unnecessary that is. Did that answer your question? I don't know if I did, really. You weren't interviewing me, but
no, it does. Because I think I resonate with some of that, but I think so I was married at the time, right, when I to a man who I, you know, had been with for a really long time, and I don't think I really let him into my whole journey to the degree that maybe I thought I did at the time. But on reflection, I think maybe I didn't massively, as you say, maybe because I didn't know a lot of myself in the beginning. I didn't really know where it was going to go. And I think there's a hesitancy when you don't really feel like you have the language, and you don't really feel like if they were to question, because I see this a lot with my clients, right, who are just like, this is what I'm doing. And then they like get really excited about it the same way as you get excited about like historically a new diet, right? Like, this is the thing that I'm doing now. And you become like the preacher. And then what happens is there's maybe some pushback, or there's some questions coming from a place of, I'm sure, love, but also maybe concern, right? Or fear of their own stuff, like, oh, what's going to happen? I'm not sure I like the sound of this. And it can be quite derailing, because people might not quite have the understanding or the language formed in their own self yet at that point. But I feel like my journey was very individual, and I don't necessarily think that is like, I'm not sitting here saying, don't do that, that was a complete mistake. Like, I think we're quite entitled within relationship to go on our own journeys, right? Whether it's spiritual, whether it's health, whether it's movement, whatever it is. And I think the dieting thing, my husband thought that was just like my hobby that I enjoyed. Right? That's what Gillian does. She loves health stuff, right? And of course, that was what in the end happened to me, was that it went from dieting to the pursuit of health at all flipping costs, may I add, which I think we're going to cover next episode. But I think he, like you say, I think he thought that I loved it. So when I started stepping away from it, I think but like you, he would send me articles. He would be like, oh, you'd be interested in this, like something they're talking about on the radio, because I think he was tuned in enough to it. But here's the thing. My husband was never somebody who struggled with their weight. My husband was never someone who ever intentionally tried to modify his body in any way. That's not to say he was free of fat phobia, right? I don't think any of us is. And I certainly wouldn't say that he was, because he would have judgments around himself, right? But never like, this is my new diet, or this is what I'm going to be doing. So for a lot of folks, there is that underlying thing of like, well, if my body changes and my body grows, how's that going to impact our relationship? And therefore, how's that going to impact me? You know, I might want peace around food. I might want freedom in my body, but I still want the love and acceptance of my intimate partner.
Yeah, definitely. But you know what you're saying there about, you know, partners who don't struggle, that is such a common discussion amongst, you know, my clients, when they're saying my partner doesn't ever have to do the things that I have to do to try and change my body, to try and shrink my body. But even that said, I don't think many people are, even if they don't actively have to control their weight, I quite often see people saying, well, if you just ate like me, because they assume that they're not having to control their weight is because they are somehow doing all the right things. The right thing. Using air quotes for people who are listening or watching.
Yeah.
You know, that is such a common thing where they say, I just, you know, if you just did what I did, or you just ate like me, you know, then your body would just look like mine. And that's not true, not the case. You know, we've had a lot of stuff going on in our upbringing. There could be stuff around food scarcity. There might be a different relationship with, who was dieting around us. This is, all through growing up before we've met them, and they might not have that kind of experience. And it might just in their mind sit there with that very black and white kind of, well, if you want to look like this is how you just be.
Yeah.
And this is how you eat, and this is how you move. And it's as simple as that. And it isn't as simple as that. But what I'm trying to say is, when we're going through this journey, we don't realize that yet, because in the beginning, I didn't realize that either. Yeah. I still thought it was the way I was eating, the way I was moving my body, and that I just hadn't tuned in enough, or that I hadn't, that's why my body wasn't
tried
thinner.
hard enough. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's that thing that and you could extend that to the general public at large, right? Genetically thin people believe that they are doing something more correct, more right, more morally virtuous, in whatever way it relates to food and exercise, that ultimately fat people are not doing, right? Or bigger people are not doing. And it's absolutely not as simple as that. But I can see if someone has genetically always been thin, thus never struggled with food, would believe that it's through their own doing. So when and I'm really curious as well. I often ask clients, like, have you actually shared the honest struggle with your partner about what it's been like, the body shaming when you were a kid, through to like being weighed at school and the embarrassment of like in gym class or swimming, or and all the diets and all the sense of failure time and time again? Like, how much are we honest about that with our partners? How much are we honest that we feel deep shame around our body? Or how much of it do we keep hidden? And I get asked a lot of the time. I can count on more than one hand the amount of clients that once we've started working together after a few sessions, when they really, really start to lean harder into anti-diet work and really start to feel in their body like, this feels good. This is what I really, really want to do and pursue. This feels right. This feels like the right path for me. But when they try and explain it to their other half, there's like a lot of questions come up that they, as I said earlier, they feel like they maybe can't answer. So then they come to me and say, could you do a session with my partner, or like my husband? Yeah. Can I bring them into a session? I need you to explain what this is, because it is really hard. And I think a lot of the resistance from partners does come from a place of fear. What does it mean? Like, does it mean you're just going to like eat whatever's nailed down and your body's just like going to grow and grow? And like, that's their fat phobia, that's their fear, right? Yeah. But there is so much misunderstanding around this stuff, and for the onus to be on the person going through the work to try and explain that can be really hard. And the ultimate answer to that is always no, right? I'm like, that's my contract isn't with them. So it's a really, really hard thing to work through. And I think, like we said, probably in our holiday diet talk episode, in the beginning, it's not really about getting their buy-in. It's not really about getting them to believe that health at every size is the right direction for them, right? Because as you said, if they've not had the same lived experience, it's really going to be hard for them to understand the whys and the wherefores. What you're asking for in the beginning is support and respect that you know what's best for you.
Yes, I love that. I think that's that there is the key part to it, isn't it? This isn't just about like, how do I get my partner on board? How do I do this? It is just that there. It's understanding that that's all you're really asking for in that beginning bit. And actually, if you simplify it down to that makes it kind of easier to navigate in a way, because that's it. I'm just asking for that one little bit, which is just to,
trust me.
Trust me. But I think this kind of swings back to what I'm saying, is at that point, do we trust ourselves to say that?
No,
this is what I mean. We're still in distrust with our body. We're still in distrust with our body. We're still not sure that we're going to be happy with how our body changes and whether we can get over our fat phobia. So it's very difficult to bring someone alongside, so to speak, with you in that journey. And I think it does really unearth all the things that you're nervous about. And I think we're worried about exposing the cracks in our relationship, which we all have. And it's worrying, like, it's fear. It brings up lots of fear around that. Like, am I going to expose the fact that my partner maybe isn't as chill around this kind of stuff and hasn't got my best interest at heart? That is hard. That's hard to manage.
Yeah. And it starts, particularly when you're working with a coach, right? Or you're joining a program, it starts, the conversation can start really early, because often it's a joint decision around money. Right.
Yes.
If you are somebody who is financially independent and you have your own money, then what you choose to spend it on is up to you, right? But if you are in a situation where you feel like you choose to make decisions around money and, you know, significant amounts of money with your partner, then that is a discussion that has to happen really, really early on. And sometimes clients will say, like, won't lie to the partners, but will just say, I'm working with someone to help me around my food stuff. And maybe, and really, actually, when you say that to people, because I know when I say to people, I'm a coach, I help folks around food and body stuff. 99.9% of people would never believe in a million years that what I'm not doing is tell people to eat less and move more.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
Like it's wild. You're
it's
just
wild,
like,
isn't it? Yeah.
You know, I'm working with somebody around food and body stuff. The ultimate assumption is always going to be, I'm engaging someone to help me eat less and lose weight. The idea that might be anything other than that is so wild. And continues to be. That's like one of the fun things about my job, right? Getting back to as you say, like, trying to work out, once you get into that process, having the trust in yourself, which you probably don't have, right? If you've been a hardcore dieter, you most likely will not have trust in yourself and your body and your what this process might look like. But what you touched on there, which I think is a really important part too, is discovering perhaps that your relationship is conditional on you looking a certain way. And I think that's a big fear for a lot of us.
Conditional on you looking a certain way, conditional, I can't say that word, on you following a certain set of rules that maybe you know, arbitrary rules that you made up for yourself, or you made up for yourself together, who knows. And that you're that suddenly goes into thin air, and that is really hard, you know. It's, how do you navigate that, right? How do you where do you begin with that? Because you're going through something yourself, and yet you've got to deal with that as well on top of it, you know, knowing that your partner might not be as open to your body changing as you would like. It makes you feel safe to continue the journey in a really expansive, free way, which is what we as coaches are sort of almost asking of our clients. Is like, I want you to kind of be curious. You can't be curious when there's rules, because that doesn't work.
Or you can't be curious when there's a conditionality around your how you look, your size, your weight, you know, how you show up aesthetically in that relationship. I was thinking there about you were asking, like, how do you start to navigate that? And you know, it's really, really hard to have these open discussions in the very beginning of this work, and I think it's maybe something that grows over time. But what we have to bear in mind is fat phobia, this anti-fat bias that we talk about, lives inside all of us. So I think we do have to expect that it's going to be in our partner. So the question isn't, is my partner fat phobic? I think you can pretty much guess the answer will be yes. The question is, and I think this is maybe what you alluded to at the very beginning, is my partner open to bringing awareness to their biases and going through some of the work to dismantle that, right? Now, that's not to say that, like, your husband or like, you know, my husband necessarily would like do the work in the terms of how we do the work, the actual like joining a program and reading and listening and doing all that, but just being open to the fact that there might be a whole other way of existing, and that someone else has a very, very different lived experience to our own. So like, and you said, I knew he would be because that's kind of why I married him, right? But there's going to be folks out there who maybe know that their partner can be a bit of a bigot, can be a bit fatphobic, because they've heard you maybe been sitting watching TV together and they've made a comment about somebody's body, right? Maybe you know that your partner likes to have a slim, you know, woman on their arm, or that they like to go on a night out and you're the one that, you know, looks really attractive. And I want to really caveat that by saying you can be big and fat and be really fucking attractive, but through the eyes of, you know, someone who hasn't done this work, there is that absolute belief that attractiveness and desirability can only live in a thin body. Not for everyone, but there's a lot of folks that I work with whose partner does think that way. So the question is, are they open to learning and, well, probably most likely unlearning a lot of this shit?
You're right. And I think if we have been played a part in that fat phobia as well, like as in perpetuating it, because we've had that as well, that's tricky. But, you know, going back to what you're saying there, it's as hard as it is to kind of acknowledge this. For me, when I'm you know, listening to what you're saying, it's actually comes back to us raising our standards. And what do we want from a partner? What do we like, values and beliefs, like we talked about earlier? You know, what do we believe? What do we value in a partner? And is our partner meeting that? And it's tough, but you
That's
know,
hard.
yeah, it's really, really hard. But again, like, you know, we have it is hard, but it's also harder to try and control and contort your body to be something that it's really fighting against you on, and you are spending the rest of your life doing that to meet someone else's need or desire or like preference, as they, you know, sometimes I hear people say it. And I think sometimes those messages are there early on. I can think back to a friend I had many years ago who was asked by her partner that she wanted to get married, but he said, I will if you lose several dress sizes.
Red fucking flag.
Red flag. But you know,
but do you know what?
She wasn't like, oh, that's a red flag. It was like, so better knuckle down, better get on with it. I mean, dig deep, let's go. And I was so far into it myself, even though I could see it was a red flag, I still didn't have the language to say, oh, okay, well, is this the right idea? What's going to happen after that day? Even if you are successful, what's going to happen then?
I'm thinking back, and like I mean, my guess is I probably would never have married somebody that made such a kind of shitty comment, but I got engaged when I was 23, and I think back to my 23-year-old self, and there is no way that I would have been of the mindset that I am now. 100% I was of the mindset that like it is a reflection of my self-discipline and my self-worth and my ability to just like have my shit together. If, you know, to like being in a thin body represents all of that, right? I was so invested in that. And my husband always knew, like, had kind of known me as somebody who'd controlled food, right? So that was the dynamic from the very beginning of our relationship. So as you said earlier, to change that identity, right, over the period of time. But guess what? In long-term relationships, we all change, right? But in what way, I guess, is the question. I see a lot of couples bonding over whatever diet they're on. It's a joint venture. They go to the gym together, they, you know, control their food together. It's always been a thing that they've done together. So to divest from that can be really it can shake the dynamic in the relationship. I have people that I've worked with who have really hardcore dieted to enter into the dating game and to find somebody, because, you know, especially nowadays on online dating, to take a photo, a full length photo of your fat body and put it online, knowing that there's going to be a lot of people out there that's just like, I'm not interested in somebody who's fat, right? That can be really, really hard. But the question, I think, what it comes back to is, do you want to attract someone on the basis of kind of, I mean, I don't quite want to say a lie, but I also want to say a lie, because if you're so heavily suppressing your weight, you're not actually putting forward your true self. And then it's almost like as a way to kind of hook somebody in, which I totally get, right? We're so aesthetically driven, particularly with dating apps. But then what? You have to keep that up for the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it better? And I know Virgie Tovar speaks about this brilliantly, right? That isn't it better to put forward your true self from the beginning, in terms of like, this is my body, I'm not going to hide it, I'm going to put full length photos on. And that might mean that there is only a fraction of the pool of people out there that might actually want to date me. But out of that pool of people, there's not a condition around me suppressing my weight. So what's the preference? But for so many of us, we are entering into this work already in long-term relationships.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
And that can be really, really hard then to change that dynamic within the relationship.
Yeah, and this is exactly what I was thinking. Like, if you're dating, you can raise your standards from the beginning. You can say, actually, I don't date men who don't accept my body as it is right now, as it is, however it needs to be. And I think, going back to what you're saying about Virgie Tovar, I've heard her say before, like, I don't want to be with anyone, it's not safe for my body to grow and change around. And like you say, you can set that preference, but if you're already in that relationship, and you're in a committed intimate relationship with somebody, and that has been your identity, that was definitely the identity me and my partner had. Dieting together, he was never going to the gym unless I was like, right, we're on it, and then like, okay, right, we're on it. And the difference between us was when it kind of fell to pieces, day 3, he didn't feel any shame. I did. I felt shame. I was in the cupboard binging. He wasn't. He was just following the rules as per set by me, kind of like following along, and not actually really kind of having like a thought about whether he really wanted to do it himself. I think he just thought, okay, this is for our health because Tamsin says it is. Like,
and this is the thing, it's for our health, right? And I think that you just hit on what I think a lot of I want to say the actual fear and the perceived fear of partners when the person who is going through this work is saying, I'm going to move away from dieting, it's so destructive, I can't do it anymore, I'm pursuing this other thing. A lot of the time it's like, but what about your health, right? We've talked a lot about this in the podcast, and sometimes it is a genuine concern for, I love this person and I firmly believe that health lives in smaller bodies, therefore I want this person to be with me for a lifetime, I want to grow old together, I have a genuine concern. But there's also sometimes, like, I think sometimes that can be used as a kind of like way to cover up fat phobia as well, right? And we see maybe that we see that from strangers, right? Particularly online, like when you get trolled online for being like, hey, like, don't discriminate against fat bodies, and somebody comes online and be like, but what about your health, you're going to die early. It's like, I don't see you walking along the street and like smacking cigarettes out of people's mouths.
Exactly.
You actually don't give a shit about strangers' health. No. You're a bigot.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think it can be hard in relationships where, like, and also if you're already in a bigger body, the chances are you've got medical professionals who always tell you to lose weight, whether you've broken a fingernail or whatever it might be that you've done, and your partner is maybe used to that kind of health trolling from family members and medical teams and all that kind of stuff. So do you see what I mean? Like that might be like, we're not, because everybody's got a different starting point, right? When they come to this work, And not all of us are starting in a thin body and maybe, you know, growing a couple of dress sizes. Sometimes we're already in a bigger body and we're already having that weight stigma and, you know, that oppression against our body as it is.
Yeah.
And to then say, I don't know where my body's going to land because this is, you know, we're going to be more free around food, can feel frightening to us, but also that's when the health trolling might come in
People
from a
around
partner.
us. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah.
but
What you're saying is it's not just the fear of weight gain, it's the fear or opening up to the possibility that there might not be weight loss in the future.
Yeah. And that's going
when people are really invested in that weight loss. Yeah, I totally get it.
Taking that kind of like option off the table, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I think just in terms of like what we want to leave folks with to kind of go on, I mean, you know, what would your advice be to somebody who is, you know, back to the question, you know, all the questions that we were asked about this episode, what would your advice be to anybody who is starting this work, partway through this work, somewhere along their food and body journey, and either doesn't have their partner's buy-in or fears that, like, you know, what are we leaving folks with, I think is my last question.
There's a couple of things I want to leave folks with, and one is absolute, like, happy to give some pointers, some advice. But before I do that, can I just mention a kind of, sometimes I feel like we on this podcast are really, really good at validating people's legitimate fears, right? Because this can feel really, really lonely. And I think a lot of the stuff we talk about is stuff that we felt and experienced. But I'm also really conscious that there very often, and ultimately this is why we do this work, there is an absolute payoff, reward, joy, and pleasure to be had in embracing your natural genetic body size, right? And not suppressing your weight. And I know from personal experience that my self-worth has grown massively through embracing what is naturally who I am without having to change it. And I want to caveat that by saying, I'm not any longer trying to change my food and body, but there's a lot of other stuff in my character or my personality or my emotions and feelings that I'm not so accepting about. And that is a perpetual journey, right? But when it comes to food and body stuff, I'm so anchored in it and I feel so sure and good about it 99% of the time that it has absolutely enhanced my relationships, right? So, like, as the listeners know, I am in a new relationship with a woman, and 100% this body journey that I've been on, and you know, obviously I've paired with someone, I partnered with someone who's also done a lot of body work as well, that it is 100% enhanced emotional closeness, physical closeness, and being able to enjoy my body and each other's bodies on a whole different level.
Yeah.
So, and I also hear that from clients who have maybe had a partner where they have diet bonded together, and then once they've freed themselves up around food, it's taken the pressure off their partner to feel like they have to always constrain themselves around food and not allow their body to just be, and they're having the best sex of their lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So
absolutely.
I think it's really important to mention that ultimately exists or can exist on the other side. And this is why we do this work, so that we can feel freedom, so that we can feel more at peace, so that we can have sex in a more relaxed way where we're not observing ourselves, where we can coexist in life with someone else, knowing that our body just as it is absolutely good enough.
Yeah. And there's so much joy to be had in terms of like exactly what you're saying there, but you know, even just eating together and not having to choose a certain thing from the menu, and just it goes on and on. Like we could do a whole episode on just the joy. I think we should. I think we should. Maybe that's a January episode for just like, let's just focus a whole episode on all the good things that come out of doing this work. Because you're absolutely right. It doesn't always end in you thinking, okay, this relationship's not for me, it's not going to work out. That's not the case. there's loads of other scenarios, all with joy attached to them, that can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. But getting back to you asking how to kind of go about navigating this stuff, and I want to kind of reiterate something I said earlier. When you're new into this work, try to relieve yourself of the pressure of being the educator to your other half. You do not have to be the educator, right? That's a big onus to put on yourself. When you are still at the beginning and still learning about this stuff, you're trying to still figure out for yourself if this is what you want to pursue. So it's okay to have an individual journey learning about this stuff. You get to decide how much you share, right? Yeah. And then if your partner is open to learning more, you don't have to be the one that delivers that education. Yeah. They can go and listen to podcasts. You can recommend a book for them to read, right? So I would say that. And then also I would say to take it step by step. Ultimately, if you're someone who has weight suppressed, it is very, very likely that your body is going to grow. But we can't say that it will. We can't say that your body will shrink. We can't stay it will stay the same. No one can. So you don't necessarily position this as like, this is ultimately what's going to happen, and this person has to be on board with it, otherwise our marriage is doomed. Yeah, exactly. Take it gently, have a lot of self-compassion for yourself, but also your partner, knowing that your partner is swimming in the fatphobic soup too. So trying to find compassion for them, and easing into it gently.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I just wanted to leave folks with something to kind of take away and go on, but I think that in itself, just like relieving yourself of the pressure of having to get somebody on board is in some ways it's like you think that's what you've got to do in the beginning. I've got to get them on board so I can give myself permission almost to continue this work, but it's not needed.
Yeah I certainly didn't anyway, but I can be a sassy, headstrong person when I like to be. So but yeah, anyway, I hope that's helpful. I hope we delivered on what folks were looking for. I probably also have to say, as a coach, this topic is probably one of the most hard and heartbreaking topics when I'm working with someone who really has a very fatphobic partner. And I think it is, out of all of this work, we talk about how hard it is in friend circles and with families of origin. I think with intimate partners, particularly long-term partners, this is probably the hardest part of this work. So be gentle with yourself and understand that it's whichever way it goes, I hope you can be true to yourself. Yeah, because that ultimately is what's going to bring you the most peace. Having conditions on being able to like or love yourself on the condition of your body being thin is hard, but it's really hard when the love of someone else is conditional on your body. There's nothing harder. So we send our love. Yeah, definitely, wherever you're at in this journey. Definitely. Yeah. Okay. All right. Signing off. Yeah. I'll catch you next time. Bye. Bye.